May the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Well, as most of you know, we're deep into the heart of the Gospel of Luke. Today is chapter 6, and we're working with the Believer's Road. We're working in the Joy Luke clubs, and I hope you're all enjoying this study. It's a very important study. The Gospel of Luke has been called the most beautiful and poetic book of the Bible. And the Acts of the Apostles was written by the same author. And as we read the Gospels, we almost could call the Acts of the Holy Spirit. Because Luke pictures a Jesus who is growing in his awareness and his trust in the Spirit. He's continually led by the Spirit. I know that if you're studying with a Joy Luke Club, you are aware of this. He's led by the Spirit at his baptism, in the wilderness, through prayer, in his public ministry, preaching in the synagogue. Jesus says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me." And now, here again in his encounter with the Pharisees about the observation of the Sabbath day, as we listen to his responses.
A reading from Luke chapter 6. On a certain Sabbath, Jesus was walking through a field of ripe grain. His disciples were pulling off heads of grain, rubbing them in their hands to get rid of the chaff, and eating them. Some Pharisees said, "Why are you doing that, breaking a Sabbath rule?" But Jesus stood up for them. "Have you never read what David and those with him did when they were hungry? How he entered the sanctuary and ate fresh bread off the altar, bread that no one but the priests were allowed to eat. And he also handed it out to his companions. Then he said, 'The Son of Man is no slave to the Sabbath. He's in charge.' On another Sabbath, he went to the meeting place and taught. There was a man there with a crippled right hand. The religion scholars and Pharisees had their eye on Jesus to see if he would heal the man, hoping to catch him in a Sabbath infraction. He knew what they were up to, and he spoke to the man with the crippled hand, 'Get up and stand here before us.' And he did. Then Jesus addressed them. 'Let me ask you something. What kind of action suits the Sabbath best? Doing good or doing evil? Helping people or leaving them helpless?' He looked around, looked each one in the eye. He said to the man, 'Hold out your hand.' He held it out. It was as good as new. They were beside themselves with anger, and they started plotting how they might get even with him.
Well, Jesus was fully aware of the commandment, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. The Jews had become litigious about the Saturday Sabbath, adding all sorts of restrictions and regulations that made it almost impossible. Working on the Sabbath was forbidden, a violation of the Mosaic law. You could only walk short distances. To walk any further, you were working. The Pharisees accused Jesus of allowing his disciples to work by gleaning some heads of grain because they were hungry. And he responded that the spirit of the law was love. The Pharisees demanded that the letter of the law be observed. They forgot that God was compassionate. Jesus made 2 points. The Sabbath was made for humankind, not man for the Sabbath. And works of mercy and necessity are permitted on the Sabbath. And he referred to the Old Testament scriptures to back this up. The incident that Tracy just read about, where David and his hungry followers ate the bread from the temple, from the altar. Bread reserved for priests, because human need comes before ceremonial regulation. But as far as the Pharisees were concerned, that act was unthinkable. Jesus was trying to make them see that God's love for us took precedent. They had established the law, and maybe the tradition needed to change. Putting human need before man-made laws deepens the meaning of the Sabbath. It doesn't make it less holy. It makes it more holy. The Pharisees' question was, is it lawful? Jesus' question was, is it loving? And this sets the tone of chapter 6 in the Gospel of Luke, where God's grace and forgiveness are reflected in Jesus' interaction with people. And we see that we need to seek ways to deepen the understanding of our relationship to the Spirit and to others.